So I wish I could say this was like a story of like the great epiphany after a bunch of beers, and then like the next day we started this thing. But actually, it took a long time, and it went through a bunch of iterations. So we really did start by saying, oh, we'll create a business that will be like the shining light for responsible business. And then we really did look around, and we saw all these amazing companies, and there are a bunch of you in the room who were totally inspiring to us. And so we started talking with them about what they needed. And actually, the first idea we had was, well, we should start an investment business that invests in these businesses. And the twist should be, instead of creating a fund that's going to be forced to sell after a few years, we should create a holding company. We were going to call it B Holdings. We saw like lack of standards to tell the difference between good companies and good marketing, lack of a legal structure, and that drove us to say we should create a certification called a B Corporation that has two main components to it that make it rigorous. One is that the companies have to meet a minimum set of social and environmental performance standards, and so we created a rating system that tries to measure social and environmental impact across the whole business and its impact on all of its stakeholders. And then the second thing is that the businesses commit to, legally, in their corporate articles, commit to considering the interests of their stakeholders, not just their shareholders, when they make decisions. And those are kind of the two components of getting B Corp certification.
So in sustainability, I'm responsible for philanthropy, operational efficiency, advocacy, and the general sense of, although all of our coworkers do this, of having New Belgium be a role model for sustainable practices.
And so companies go through this assessment, and you can ask them to talk about what the process is like, but it's not, I mean, on one hand, it's meant to be fast enough that somebody can actually get through it. And it doesn't require consultants and months and months and millions of dollars of work the way some big corporations do sustainability reports, because this is about entrepreneurs and helping entrepreneurs. But on the other hand, it needs to be rigorous enough that that it has substance and that people can trust it, because the whole idea is we're trying to create a brand that consumers can trust.
There's a recent Harvard Business School study that tracked the performance of 180 companies over 18 years. And the 90 firms that had adopted environmentally and socially responsible policies significantly outperformed their peers. It's the first study of its kind that was over such a long period of time, and the difference between performance was really large in terms of financial stability and growth, which is pretty exciting. So I'm curious, I know B-Lab has been around since what? When was it first?
2007.
2007. So do you all have data at this point in time that would support this observation by the Harvard School of Business?
One of the things that's really important is for some businesses, there are trade-offs and they want to make them. They're choosing to maybe have a lower margin or to create more impact. For others, there isn't a trade-off. The sustainability actually makes them do better, either because it makes their consumers happier, and therefore their consumers are willing to pay more or more brand loyal, or it makes their workers happier or more loyal. So I think it sort of depends on what the business is. In the case of that company, the freelancers insurance company that I mentioned, like they choose to take a much lower margin than any other insurance company in their industry. And they're doing that so that they can make the health insurance less expensive and more available to people who are not just independent workers who are cool computer programmers, but also nannies and taxi drivers who barely make a living wage. So I think it depends. That said, the B Corp community as a whole, like during the financial crisis, those companies stayed in business more successfully by a pretty significant margin than other businesses of the same size or the same set of characteristics. And you can decide how much stock you want to put in that kind of a statistic, but certainly like they weathered the storm better, and at least the theory is that they did that because they had more loyal consumers and more loyal workers, and probably had less risky practices. There weren't a bunch of B Corps that were highly leveraged or doing drop swap, euro shackle transactions in the capital markets.
What really moved us to need to do it, we felt like to really need to do it, because like you're saying, we're practicing stakeholder capitalism, because I think that's shorthand for what B Corp is about, you know. We've been practicing stakeholder capitalism all along, but we transitioned to becoming 100% ESOP, 100% employee-owned at the end of December. So Kim, our founder, and her family, and some of the management sold all their shares into an ESOP. And one of the things that made us afraid to make that leap is now the trustee of the ESOP is basically allowed to vote on if you have a tender offering, like an unsolicited purchase offer, does the ESOP trustee feel impelled to sell to the highest bidder, even though that might mean people get laid off, our values go away, things like that. And so B Corp fit in very nicely for us to be able to change our bylaws and to say, and even more broadly, succession planning, right? So you're not, you know, your company should be around for a long time, whether you are or not. And so even if you're not there, the values that you believe in will live on through the change in the bylaws. So both of those things were important to us.
What is the marketing benefit to companies that
Being a B Corp?
Yeah, being a B Corp. I mean, how are you all supporting the perception of the public about the meaning of the symbol?
Yeah, there's a bunch of ways. I mean, when we started, the first people to become B Corps, like there was obviously no one knew what it was, and so there was no value to it. And over time, it started to have value, but it's still like, you know, I think as a brand, it's still a relatively limited community of people. But there have been a bunch of things, and a bunch of them were not intentional. So early on, a bunch of companies came to us and wanted to provide discounts to B Corps the same way that they were providing discounts to nonprofits. So, you know, there are companies like Salesforce or NetSuite or Intuit that had already had these programs to, you know, give stuff for free or at a big discount to nonprofits. And they were really interested in trying to support sustainable businesses, but of course there wasn't like a good way for them to know. And in particular, for all of them, the legal component of B Corp certification gave them comfort that they could do that and sort of treat it the same way as supporting a non-profit, because they felt like they were giving discounts to companies that were actually going to maintain mission over a longer period of time. What I hope we're doing is building a community of businesses that that consumers can look to rely on, but that also that community can be that community is more and more working together to create better and better practices. You know, to raise the bar.